This is a talk called Chavin de Huantar, Peru, la Cultura y Archeologia. So I'll talk about the culture of Chavin a little bit. Sorry, we only have that one panel working, but we'll do our best. So this pictures the landscape when you come into Chavin up in the highlands. So it's really interesting, and it reminded me a lot of Rohan from like the Lord of the Rings series. So I don't know, Charlie, is it geologically related in New Zealand at all?
Not too far away.
Not too far away, right? So I saw those scattered stones, and it was just really beautiful landscape. We were driving on those. It took us 11 hours to get from Lima to Chavin by bus, and you're going down all these windy roads and everything. And then when you get to the top of the mountain, you're up at 14,816 feet. And you come to this like passageway, and it's called the Huantar Tunnel, and it's one of the world's highest tunnels. And so you go to this tunnel and you're in this black place. It's 2 lanes. It's I don't know, maybe a quarter-mile long through the mountain. And then you get out on the other side and you're in a totally different ecosystem, totally different ecozone. So you get through there. Here's a statue that was built at the entrance to the Ancash region once you get into Peru. These are what the roads look like. They're really winding. You have to step down all these different roads. And then you come to the valley that Chavin's located in. You have this patchwork of quinoa, potatoes, corn being grown by traditional Quechua farmers of the highlands. And you can see kind of the road down there. So they have some of these big blocks that kind of protect people, because you get really close to these edges of these roads, and it's literally like hundreds, if not thousands of feet drop down to the bottom of the valley. So you wind around all the way down, and then so this is a view from a mountain just above Chavin. This is the Plaza de Armas right here, and then here's a Spanish Catholic church. And the temple is back over this way, and then there's the Museum de Chavin de Huantar further down the road. And so I took this photo from this hilltop, little sub-mountain before you get to the bigger mountain in 2013. That's when I did field schools down there in 2013, and then in 2015 I returned again. So this is Plaza de Armas, like I said. Cathedral de Chavin de Huantar is right here. So this is a gathering place that people come. People have a lot of shops, little tiendas and mercados in here. Our hostel was right back here, and then we walked down this street. And it was about a half-mile walk to the site that we were excavating. So here you can see a Highland woman. She's dressed in traditional Indian Highland clothing. You can see a burro behind her. This shop here is where we got a lot of our supplies. You'd have to get bottled water. Us as Americans couldn't drink their water. And then you could find other things like Ritz crackers and Oreos and other snacks to placate our American wants. And then this is a street that led down to the Hotel Inca that we stayed at. This was one of the local shaman's apartments. I wanted to get a photo of that. He does some ceremonies with another Westerner, with a Westerner. This guy's Peruvian, and he does some kind of healings with local people and tourists. This is a fruit that I just fell in love with. You can sometimes find these at Hy-Vee. They're called chirimoyas. So they look like little dragon eggs. They got like scales on them, but this fruit inside is really delicious. The only thing I can think about what it tastes like is like cherry vanilla yogurt. I don't know why. And then there's these big, you know, half-inch black seeds in the cherry vanilla. But I found them in Vermilion IV before, and I was like, what are these doing here? And then this is this is a ground cherry in Peru. So these are sweet. These are sweet like an actual, like a Bing cherry. But it's relative. It has one on the plains that the American Indians gather for stews. You're only supposed to eat it when you harvest in October. Otherwise, it's a solanaceae plant, so it can make you sick if you eat it too soon. But these are really sweet, like fruit. And they make candies out of them. But it was neat to see a prairie plant in North America on the plains and like an exact, almost same subspecies of plant down there growing. This is one of the people's guinea pig farms that they farmed. There's llama and cuy or guinea pig is just about the only forms of protein that the Andeans really had before the arrival of the colonialists with the pigs and cows and chickens. So traditionally people still grow these animals, raise them, kind of like pets, and then they eat them for certain ceremonies or festivals. And that was kind of neat. This was Zonia's and Miguel's little operation going on. They sell to some of the local stores. And this is what a cuy looks like when it's been quartered, cooked in oil, and then this is some barley they serve with it, and some local potatoes with ahi sauce. What's that?
What does it taste like?
It tastes kind of like
Chicken?
greasy chicken or duck, but not a lot of meat on it. So some of the little boys were kind of making some of us turn our stomachs because they were chewing out the skulls and they would suck the eyes out and just normally to them, and they throw them to the dogs for a snack. Then here's a llama. If you ever see a llama that looks like this, with its ears back, it's gonna probably spit at you, so get ready to dodge. This is the temple Chavin de Huantar. Yeah, this is the main temple complex from 1000 BCE, and I think it went until the early 1st, 2nd, or 3rd century. And then here you can see a black and white portal. There's inscriptions all over this temple. I think they had large ceremonies. They have these doorways that it's possible that the priest would come out on, and they'd have probably dressed in really colorful clothing. And they probably had a lot of, nighttime ceremonies too, because traditionally some of the Quechua people still gather here and have different festivities and things for tourists to see. But it's interesting. There's just so many tunnels into this place. It must have taken eons to make this place functional. But it was a place that gathered people from far distances. Like you'd have people coming up from the Pacific, people coming all the way from the Amazon basin to come here and be pilgrims. For some reason they were coming to the Andes. No one's really sure why. But the Chavin people had a really large sphere of influence in Peru. And then this is the temple that we were looking at. They had some scaffolding up here to protect some of the erosion on the temple itself. These large mountains behind. A river comes down this valley and drains right down here. And then this is the sunken plaza. They think that there was people gathered all around down the sunken plaza. And then there are stairs leading up to the temple, and then there's, on either side, there was large temple complexes as well. So the tenon heads used to cover the temple. This is the only one that's still intact that's on the temple, but they've collected a lot of them that have fallen. They have a like a tenon that would fit into the stonework, and then it gave the impression of these floating heads when people would come and visit this temple. So here's another picture of that tenon head. You can see the feline jaguar-like teeth, and they have anthropomorphized from human to animalistic representation in these tenon heads. And here's another one on the side view. It's the same one that's still intact. And then here are some from the museum down the road. So you can see these nasal drainages on these tenon heads and the eyes rolled back in the head. So they think this is from, they would do the Wachuma, it was San Pedro tea, and they would also take vilca seeds that were gathered from the Amazon, and they would ingest the vilca seeds that were crushed into a powder and then snorted, and it caused this nasal drainage. So that's how we have direct evidence that they were using this substance to have some of these vision quests and things at the temple. So here's a couple more. Here you can see some nose plugs, and the sucked in cheeks is ethnographically, you can observe it in people that take the Wachuma tea for ceremony, and they use it some of the shamans use the Wachuma tea just like a psychologist would, administering medicines to people today. And then on this far right one, you can see the more feline and jaguar figure, tusks coming out, canines. And then this was some of the first direct evidence that San Pedro is being used at the temple. We have this smaller, it was about this big tenon head with the San Pedro cacti emanating from the eye orbits. And you have this jaguar feature, which is very prominent in the Chavin art.
So you said all these are like 3,000 years old?
Yep. This was a pre-formative period before the Wari, and then after that came the Inca. So this is the Temple obelisk, Teo obelisk. He was a prominent archaeologist that did a lot of work at the temple, and they found this obelisk near the temple, and it had fallen over, and they excavated it. And this is the actual obelisk. It's now in the museum. I think it's covered in like plexiglass or glass now to protect it, because too many people are trying to touch it all the time and different things. But some of the art you can see in it, this is what it looks like unfolded. So this is one side of the obelisk, and then these panels go down. You can see these caiman-like alligator-type creatures, the heads, and then the arms. And then you can also see other plants in here, like this is called the Andean cross, and it has, they just found out recently that that's what a cross-section of the San Pedro campus looks like. And then you have the Strombus shell here, and you have a spondylus shell here, and that was all used in religious iconography. There's some manioc and the Kira plants in here, and these are all plants that were found down in the Amazon. So people knew of them, people were possibly, and then there's peanuts in this art too. And so people were bringing some of these items and ideas up into the Andes and sharing that. You can see a bird-like creature here, and then the whole kind of caiman or alligator creature there, and then I can show it. This explains it, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, manioc is this plant. Akira is this plant. the Andean cross. Here's another jaguar that happens to be shown a lot in their iconography. Yeah, so a lot of stuff going on. And the shells were very important to this culture as well, the spondylus and the strombus. And those come from the oceans of Ecuador, so they're being brought in from great distances to these temples. So here's a colorized version of this artist's interpretation of what it may have looked like if it was painted. And you can see all the different art on there, and then the main caiman heads, and each side is different. So there's some really intense research going on, debate on this artifact right now, and some new publications that'll be coming out. And some scholars think they might have deciphered what it is and what it means. So we'll see if that's not published yet, but it'll be coming out soon.
So is this part of the Inca civilization?
Excuse me?
Is this part of the Inca civilization or is it something different? Part of the Inca?
Way before the Inca, like 2,000 years before the Inca. So this is the preformative. This is the beginning of monumental architecture in the Peruvian Andes, and then another culture comes along called the Wari, and the Wari become the Inca in about 1150 AD. So it's a long progression of cultures transitioning. And here's what the chambers and the catacombs look like underneath the temple. So you have all these tunnels. And Dr. John Rook at Stanford has done a lot of audio kind of studies down here. And when there's no lights on, they have run electricity down here. So tourists can go down and go walk through the temple and walk through some of the chambers. But it would have been pitch black in here. And in some of these facets, they have little windows that would let just a little bit of light in from the outside and illuminate the chambers. And then the theory is that there's other chambers that run aqueducts from the river and cause audio sounds through rushing water and valves outside the temple complex area. So if you can imagine being on the Wachuma in one of these ceremonies, I think possibly this temple is used to kind of bring people into a more shamanistic role in the culture. But if you can imagine wandering around in here in the dark and having, an experience, that's some of the theories of why these places were built. And in the middle of the old temple is this thing called the lanzón. And I think it means spear in Spanish. But this is supposed to be the knife that holds the balance between heaven and the underworld. So I'll show another picture next. There's one hand that's pointing down and there's one hand that's pointing up. And it's a sacred thing that they have found. They don't allow people in this chamber anymore, but there's like a window you can look down and kind of see it, because it's so sacred to the Peruvian people that they don't want anybody even touching it. There was an archaeologist that had taken a selfie of her kissing it, and she was terminated by the Ministry of Culture for doing that. And it was just like sacrilege to one of their ancient histories.
Terminate like in fire?
Yep. She no longer, not executed. So here you go. Here's the land zone unfolded. Here's the hand that points down and holds the underworld, and here's the hand that holds up the heavens. And then you can see the spooled ears, and then the tusk-like jaguar feline features. And then they have these claws on their feet and hands, like they think is associated with condors and birds of prey. So all these were giving me ideas. Here's one I got to take up close because I was allowed to go in that room in 2013. And I had a selfie, but Didn't touch it.
Is it?
No. And then this is where we're digging across the river from the temple. And back over here you can see the temple. This is an area called La Banda, and this is in private people's parcels. So in Peru, the government owns all the artifacts, all the cultural materials that's under the ground. The people don't own it. Like, that's different in America, where when you own the property, you kind of own the artifacts that are on your property. But that's not the case in Peru. So some of the professors would get permission to dig around these properties, and they believe La Banda was a little village that supplied the priests and supplied the temple with artisan ware and things for pilgrims and different things like that. They were making pendants, and there's obsidian flakes and lots of cooey bones, and we found like the musical instruments they were making. There was like bone flutes, different things coming out of there. And then you can see this amazing patchwork. I just couldn't get over the different colors. Some of them are green, some of them are yellow and gold. And then this is one of the structures. You can see once we got down about half meter to a meter, you can see a structural wall still intact there, and then some kind of cooking hearth there. And this was something I found in the unit I was working in 2013, and it is just this little polished, we weren't sure in the field if it was stone or bone, but it's just like, pretty much looks like a corn kernel to me. And then this was another really cool one. My professor at the time, Dr. Matt Sayer, was opening a dirt clod. And because there was a piece of carbon in there, and we were over a meter deep, and so we wanted a date on that, that stratigraphy. And he cracked that open, and we were trying to get the tinfoil to get a carbon sample, and out popped this little pendant about that big in his hand, and he didn't touch it or anything, but we had some jokes going around. Sorry that picture's kind of bad, cameras weren't that great 12 years ago. And then so we had a joke going around, like I thought maybe it was a duck, because there's ducks down the Amazon. One of my buddies said, "Oh no, maybe it's a penguin." And everybody laughed, but it could be a penguin. Man, people were down in Chile too. There's penguins down there at the tip of South America. So that was a neat artifact we found. And then this is kind of blurry, but this is like all the different pottery we were finding at the site. And they count and weigh all this, and then it goes into a repository at the Chavin Museum. And here is some of the obsidian was found in the second and third levels in our unit. This can all be sourced to certain quarries through geologic sourcing. And then here's another chamber and walls of some structures. And then this was the unit I was working in. There was a large boulder under here. There's a mystery with Chavin. Nobody knows where all the dead were buried. There's no tombs. There's no human remains other than a few from the 18 or 1900s. So we were really excited, like thought, oh, maybe there's another chamber over here on this side of the river, and we were looking around. But they dug underneath it and then just didn't find anything. So they don't know how that boulder got underneath some of this house structures. And then when you're driving up to get to Chavin, this is Laguna Canapocha. It's just a big lake up in the Andes. Here's the mountain Nevado Pastori, and that's a really big one that you go up, and it's just amazing. None of these pictures do it justice when you see it with your naked eye. And then this is some of the power that's running up to Juarez and Chavin, and they're running these big power lines up there to get the power up there. So now I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that led into the comic. So this is the San Pedro shaman. They weren't certain, they called it a staff god deity at first, But then a few years ago, I don't know, maybe a decade or less, they found this part of the art. This was in the circular plaza, and this part of the art was missing. But then they found that piece, and the carving shows roots, so we know it's the San Pedro cactus. And then this was dubbed the San Pedro shaman after that. And then they have these Medusa-like snake hair. There are no snakes at Chavin. There's a couple little lizards, but that's it. And they have these panels on their backs, and then the condor-like feet and hands for claws, and the eyes rolled up back in the back of their head. So this is what the drawing looks like, the art, and some snakes hanging down. So this is the Medusa holding some spondylus shells. So Strombus is what they make the Q2s out of, the trumpet shell horns that you see, or have you heard of maybe? And this is the spondylus shell. This was another sacred shell that was brought up from Ecuador. And you'll see these in the art of the comic. So here's that Medusa figure. And we don't know if they're gods, deities, or represent shamans. We don't know that for sure. It's all speculation. But I had a lot of years to think about it, and then so I thought about, what would it be like if you were an artisan and you got moved into a new hierarchy with the priesthood. So that comes to the Strombus shell. They use these in ceremonies. They'd have carvings in it. Here you can see some more of the art of the eyes and the teeth and the claws. And they would blow on, here's some trumpets they found in galleries at the temple, and some of them were used so often that the carvings were worn off the trumpet shells. So this is a drawing by Helene Bernier, and then, so that's the use where they used some of these so long that they wore the art right off of them. And this is one that they found the function. You blow in through this hole. You use your right hand to put in that trumpet, and then you blow, and the sound comes out the other end. And they would do this every dig season. They'd give offerings to the Pachamama, candy and tobacco offerings at the temple for a good season, and give an offering back to the temple and the earth. And then they would blow this from the top of that hill I took the picture of Chavin. They'd blow the drum, the tutu they call them, and then begin the excavations for that year. But that was something they ritualistically probably did. And here's another item you'll see in the comic pages. This is related to Chavin, they believe, but I think it was found in Bolivia. They think this is a mortar that they were using to crush some bilca seeds, but I used it for a different purpose in the comic. And here you can see some of the Andean crosses and different things, and then there's the jaguar teeth, and you have this feline. So this leads to Dotty's Diner. I got involved with John, and he knew I had done some writing and studying some other cultures, so he's writing. Him and Randy are working on this comic book company. It's a startup here in Sioux Falls, and then this is their second comic. They have another comic called Cosmotrope, and then this comic is based on the space diner that has the gods hanging out in, and they view and look upon their patrons from this place in space. So that gave me an idea to write about mine and my best friend Ed's art. So we worked on this last winter. So this is the cover. This is a sketch. We were just screwing around, drawing. He's a really good artist, and I really like the art, so we use that for the cover. Hanan Pancha means the universe in Quechua, so that's why I named it that. So here's page 1. So we have these gods. I named them with the Quechua word. So Waraku, which means cactus in Quechua, and Patutu, which means shell. So he has the shells, he or she, we don't know if they're male or female, but they both have the Medusa hair. Here's the cactus deity and the shell deity, and they're using these little cups to take, they're just having tea in this diner. And then we added some little tardigrades out here in the window. We thought that'd be funny since they float through space and can withstand just about anything. And then each of the tables have these little projectors where the gods can look down upon their patrons on Earth. And then so they can look in and watch people. So this red dot, that's Chavin. And then in the Andes Mountains, two rivers converge. So here's La Banda, here's the temple, here's the sunken plaza, and here's the circular plaza, which I'll talk about here in the next slide or two. So the Mosna Chesca comes down here, and when Mosna come here. So places where rivers converge are really sacred spaces for South American cultures and American Indian cultures as well. So there's a reason why it was built at this spot, because it's a sacred spot to those people. And then here, they had some later development over here on this part of the city, and then we just drew a little cornfield there. And then across the river from the temple is a village of small houses, La Banda. And this is where we were digging in 2013 and 2015, and then they've done a couple excavations since then, since COVID, kind of screwed things up. Peru was completely shut down with military in the streets. You had to have a pass just to go to the market to get food or anything. You had to have a military permit, and if you were caught, they'd throw you in jail. They were really serious about it. So here you can see some of the complexes, what the houses kind of would possibly look like. You have a llama on some baskets, dudes sitting by the fire, some kids playing on the inside of the plazas of the town. The main protagonist lives in this little house. And then so we look through a small window of the stone dwelling, and here you can see some unfinished patutus. So on that hologram that the gods are looking at, on summer solstice eve, Jalala, artisan, that's what artisan means, he is working on a conch trumpet. Finally, the patutu is finished for this year's gathering, and here you can see that artifact possibly on this table, some dust and bone tools to make the carvings, some kind of Peruvian pot on the table, some corn hanging. And then there's a knock at the door, and you can hear hundreds of people gathering and roaring and getting ready for this festival. So he's preparing this conch, this patutu, for the ceremony. And then the shaman comes in from the temple, and then, yeah, he says, "You've finished just in time. Quickly, give me your ayawa, or cup." And that's what this is. And then, "Here, drink. This will give you strength, endurance, vitality, and courage for the Pachamama, Mother Earth, and the people." And then he drinks it, and he goes to bed. And you have a long night ahead of you. So here's the circular plaza. Here's the sunken plaza. Here's the main temple. And then up here you can see all these labyrinths that are built in underneath these temples. But there was some of these corridors and those tunnels I showed you would lead to these stairs and then possibly into the center of the circular plaza. So people could come up out of the ground, just very similar to the kivas in the southwest during these different ceremonies. And here's the two entrances. There could have been platforms up there where the shamans are, praying or talking to the people that have been gathered out here, and people, gathered all over. And then Yeah, so here's a circular plaza. There's Lubanda back here where we were digging. And then, yeah, circular plaza. So this was lined with art. Down here, these little stones were all carvings of jaguars that were kind of chasing each other. And then they had other carvings down there, like the San Pedro shaman is right down underneath this awning, still in place. So it's still intact and part of the temple. And there's some stairs that go down, and then there possibly could, I don't know if they found anything yet, but something maybe leading up out of that central circular plaza. So here you can see the stairs coming down, you can see a entrance from the catacombs coming out of the stairs there. And then here, these are the last remaining stelas on the wall, and then here you can see a line of the Panthers. Sorry I didn't have a picture of the Panthers, but if you're interested, you can look into it more. But the San Pedro shaman is one of these two, but they have different art on this whole circular plaza all the way around when it was as pristine. So then we had that in our comic. Delala's eyes focus. He sees a wiry, skinny, toothless, white-haired man before him. Kinku, which means community in Quechua. My old friend, and he's holding a knife. So we don't know what's going to happen next. So he comes out of this. This is kind of skipping forward a couple pages in the comic. But here on the art, we didn't have time to do all the jaguars down there because we were running out of time. But here you can see the Medusa with the spondylus and the strombus shells. And then here are the San Pedro shamans in that circular plaza. And then, so I just found out from a colleague, Dr. Silvana Rosenfeld, that they actually found a condor skull at Chavin this last year. So it was thought like they were maybe, all these claws and talons were from the Chulu Wally, which is a eagle down there in the Andes. So that's why I used that, but I wish I would have known in time. I would have had a big condor sitting right there. And then if you want to see more of the comic, there's a shameless SDAS ad I paid for out of my own pocket to try to get some PR for SDAS. And yeah, it's printed in the comic, so that is